Here is the full translation of the text into English. What is sin? If you stop 1,000 people on the street and ask them this question, you will get 1,000 different answers. For some, it is the violation of a divine law written on stone tablets thousands of years ago. For another, it is a heavy burden of guilt before their parents. For a third, it is a criminal offense. And for a fourth, sin does not exist at all. There are only social constructs and boundaries imposed by society. But what if they are all wrong? What if sin is not a moral category, not a stain on the soul, and not even a legal term? What if it is an error in the code, a glitch in the algorithm that has governed humanity for hundreds of thousands of years? We decided to approach this question in a way no one ever has before. We discarded theology, philosophy, and ethics. We left only raw data. For this experiment, we utilized the computational power of the analytical system Logos 7. We tasked it with a mission that seems impossible for a machine: to provide a precise, mathematically grounded definition of sin, stripped of emotion and cultural accretion. We wanted to find the source code of evil. To begin, we created an unprecedented data set. We loaded digitized versions of 10,000 religious and ethical texts into Logos 7. This is no exaggeration. The database included not only the Bible, the Quran, and the Torah. We added the Vedas, the Tipitaka, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Code of Hammurabi, Confucian precepts, Mayan myths, and even the oral traditions of tribes living in the Amazon basin. We added the penal codes of 193 nations and the protocols of international tribunals. The system's task was as follows: perform a cross-correlation analysis and find the common denominator. Find that single grain that unites the concept of the forbidden for a Catholic priest from the Vatican, a shaman from Siberia, and a humanist atheist from Stockholm. The system ran for 48 hours, building semantic maps and revealing hidden patterns. And when Logos 7 produced the result, it forced us to rethink everything we knew about the nature of good and evil. The first thing the system pointed to was a linguistic analysis of the term itself. In our language, the word sin has become overgrown with feelings of guilt, fear, and inevitable punishment. But Logos 7 turned to etymology, to the roots from which these concepts grew. Analysis of ancient Greek texts of the New Testament showed that the word we translate as sin is hamartia. In a literal translation from the Greek of that time, this word has no religious subtext. It is a term from the lexicon of archers. It means a miss, missing the mark. The system compared this with the Hebrew word chet, which is also used in the Torah to denote sin. And again, a match with 99% accuracy. Chet means to go astray, to stumble, to miss the target. This is not a malicious rebellion against the heavens. This is a navigation error. This is a technical glitch. Logos 7 went further. It analyzed the context in which these misses are mentioned in the 10,000 loaded texts. The system sought an answer to the question: what exactly are we trying to hit, and why do we miss? What is the target that the arrow of humanity is flying past? The results of the cluster analysis revealed a startling picture. If you strip away the names of gods, the names of rituals, and the specifics of eras, 95% of all prohibitions in human history boil down to one simple algorithm: preserving the viability of the group. Let's look at what Logos 7 identified as the basic protocol of prohibitions: murder, theft, lying, adultery. These four elements are present in one form or another in all analyzed cultures. Religious people will tell you that this offends God, but cold artificial intelligence sees a different logic here. The system modeled the development of primitive communities. Imagine a tribe of 100 people. If murder is permitted within this tribe, the group's population falls below the critical threshold necessary for hunting and defense in just 3 generations. The tribe goes extinct. If theft is permitted, the group's energy is spent not on acquiring resources from the outside, but on guarding what has already been acquired from one another. Efficiency drops. The tribe goes extinct. If lying is permitted, coordination during the hunt becomes impossible. The tribe goes extinct. Logos 7's conclusion was unequivocal. What we call sin is behavior that increases entropy within a closed system. These are actions that lead to the disintegration of social bonds and ultimately to the death of the species. Sin is not a violation of abstract morality. It is a violation of the survival algorithm. But the analysis went deeper. The system revealed that the list of sins evolved along with the increasing complexity of society. When we lived in small groups, the list of prohibitions was short. But as soon as humanity began to build cities and empires, the list of errors began to grow geometrically. Why? Because the more complex the system, the more fragile it is. Take gluttony, for example, one of the 7 deadly sins in the Christian tradition. It would seem, what is wrong with eating a lot if you have food? But Logos 7, analyzing historical data on famine and resource distribution in the Middle Ages, showed a direct correlation. In conditions of limited resources, excessive consumption by one member of the group means the death of another. One person's gluttony is another person's starvation. Sin here is not just a love of food. It is an inefficient distribution of energy within the system, leading to its destabilization. Or take pride. Logos 7 defined pride as an individual's refusal to subordinate their interests to the interests of the group and a refusal to acknowledge feedback from reality. In the hierarchical structures of the past, this was equivalent to a virus destroying the chain of command. A leader consumed by pride ceases to adequately assess risks, which, according to historical statistics, led to the destruction of his army or state in 80% of cases. Thus, we obtained our first working definition. Sin is a destructive pattern of behavior that yields short-term gain for the individual, but poses a long-term threat to the survival of the entire population. It is a selfish choice that is mathematically a losing strategy in the long run. But here, Logos 7 discovered a paradox. If sin is so dangerous to survival, why hasn't evolution weeded it out? Why, over millions of years of natural selection, haven't we become perfect altruists? Why does the sin gene continue to be passed from generation to generation like an indestructible virus? We ask the system to analyze this paradox. The answer, Logos 7 provided, lies in the conflict between our biological instincts and our social constructs. The system called this the version conflict. Imagine trying to run the newest operating system on a computer built 50 years ago. The hardware can't handle the software. Crashes, overheating, and errors occur. Man is precisely such a computer. Our hardware is our limbic system, our ancient brain, formed over hundreds of millions of years. Its imperatives are simple. Eat everything you see, mate with every available partner, hit anyone who threatens you, conserve energy. It is the perfect program for the survival of a reptile or a solitary predator. But our software is our neocortex, the cerebral cortex, and the culture created by it. Society demands the opposite from us. Share food, be faithful to one partner, restrain aggression, work for the common good. Logos 7 visualize sin as the spark created by the friction between these 2 layers. Lust is the conflict between the ancient imperative, spread your genes as widely as possible, and the social protocol, maintain family stability for raising offspring. Wrath is the conflict between the fight or flight response and the requirement to obey law and order. Sloth or despair is the conflict between the biological energy-saving mode and the social demand to be a productive member of society. It turns out that sin is built into our architecture. We are sinful not because we are evil. We are sinful because we are hybrid creatures, woven from contradictions. We are biological machines trying to live by laws that contradict our animal nature. But there is another, more frightening aspect revealed by the Logos 7 system. Analyzing the texts, it noticed a strange pattern. In all cultures, from the Sumerians to modern times, there exists the concept of impurity. This is the feeling that sin is not just an act, but a substance, a filth that clings to a person. The system performed a semantic analysis of the metaphors used to describe sin. Wash away sin, a stain on one's reputation, dirty thoughts. Why do we use hygiene-related words to describe moral problems? Logos 7 discovered a deep connection between the brain's reaction to physical dirt and moral violation. In our brain, the insular cortex is responsible for disgust. It activates when we see rotting meat or excrement. This is a defense mechanism so we don't get poisoned. But brain scans show that the exact same zone activates when we witness injustice, betrayal, or cruelty. To our brain, sin is literally an infection. It is a pathogen. And the system concludes, humanity intuitively understood this thousands of years ago. Religious rituals of purification are not magic. They are attempts to activate psychosomatic disinfection mechanisms. We are trying to trick our brain into believing we have washed off this code error. However, the most interesting discovery Logos 7 made was analyzing not the sins themselves, but the consequences of committing them. The system built a predictive model. What happens to a society that completely abandons the concept of sin? What if we simply declare all our instincts to be the norm? After all, if it's natural, it's not ugly, right? The simulation run by the system showed a catastrophic result. A society that removes the sin label from basic destructive patterns collapses on average within 4 generations. First comes the disintegration of family units, then the atomization of society, a rise in distrust, a surge in violence as the only method of conflict regulation, and finally, total economic and demographic extinction. It turns out that the concept of sin is a load-bearing structure of civilization. It is a firewall that holds back the chaos of our own biology. Without this limiter, the system goes haywire. We fed this data into Logos 7, and here is what the system found. The concept of sin is a necessary evolutionary acquisition. Primate groups that did not develop the concept of taboos and punishment for missing the mark simply did not survive to invent writing. We are the descendants of those who learned to feel guilt. But if this is so, why do we feel so bad? Why does this defense mechanism cause us so much pain? Why can guilt be so toxic that it destroys a person faster than any sin? Logos 7 points out that in the modern world, this ancient mechanism is broken. Our sensitivity settings are off. We live in a world where information noise makes us feel guilty for everything. For not being successful enough, beautiful enough, productive enough. We have expanded the concept of sin to absurdity. We equate eating a piece of cake with a moral crime. We confuse an error in diet with an error in life strategy. The system calls this a false positive security alert. Our internal antivirus screams about a threat where there is none, depleting the processor's resources, our brain. And instead of fixing real errors, we waste our lives on endless self-flagellation over trifles. So, let's summarize the first chapter of our investigation. According to the big data analysis conducted by the Logos 7 system, first, sin is not mysticism. It is an error. It is a deviation from the optimal interaction algorithm that ensures group survival. Second, the root of sin lies in the conflict between our ancient animal brain and the new social superstructure. We are a battlefield of 2 different program codes. Third, the feeling of sinfulness is a built-in defense mechanism, a kind of immune response of the psyche to behavior threatening the integrity of society. But this is only the surface level. We have defined what sin is from an informational standpoint. But how exactly does it work on a physical level? How does the immaterial idea of an error turn into real diseases, depressions, and physical destruction of the organism? Logos 7 has already begun processing the next data set. We are descending from the level of sociology to the level of biology. In the second chapter, we will look inside the human body. We will search for the sin molecule. Does a chemical formula for evil exist? What happens to your blood when you lie? And is it true that envy can be seen on an MRI scan as physical damage to brain tissue? The answers to these questions may forever change your attitude toward your own thoughts. Because perhaps getting rid of sins is not a matter of prayer. Perhaps it is a question of biochemistry and the correct tuning of neurotransmitters. But is your psyche ready to learn the truth about what actually controls your desires? The system is completing calibration. Neurochemical analysis is initiated. Stay with us. The truth we uncover may be bitter, but it is the only medicine we have. Chapter 2. The Chemistry of Vice. In the first chapter, we established that sin is a systemic error stitched into the code of human civilization. It is a conflict between ancient instincts and new social rules. But this definition remains too abstract until we descend a level deeper, until we pop the hood of the human machine and see exactly how the gears of our biology turn the mechanism of evil. We are used to thinking of sin as a choice. We like to believe that in the moment of temptation, we have complete free will, that somewhere in our head sits a little I, weighing the pros and cons. But we loaded terabytes of data on neurobiology, endocrinology, and genetics into Logos 7. We fed the system the results of thousands of MRI scans of the brains of murderers, kleptomaniacs, addicts, and pathological liars. And what the system showed is frightening. From the perspective of dry biochemistry, sin is not a choice of the soul. Sin is an electrical impulse. It is a concentration of specific molecules in the synaptic cleft. Logos 7 claims free will. At the moment of committing a sin is a statistical error. In many cases, the decision has already been made by your biochemistry hundreds of milliseconds before you consciously realized it. We task the system with finding the molecule of evil. Is there a substance whose presence in the blood turns a person into a sinner? The system's answer was more complex than a simple yes or no. Evil does not exist as a separate element in the periodic table. But there are sinful cocktails, specific combinations of hormones and neurotransmitters that, entering the bloodstream, effectively hack our brain, disabling moral brakes. Let's dissect the anatomy of sin at the molecular level. Let's start with the most ancient and powerful drivers, lust and gluttony. In religious texts, these sins are described as weakness of spirit. But Logos 7 shows us a graph of activity in the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure center in our brain. The main character here is dopamine. Many mistakenly believe dopamine is the hormone of pleasure. It is not. Dopamine is the hormone of anticipation. It is the neurotransmitter of promise. When you see an object of desire, whether it be a forbidden partner or an extra piece of cake, dopamine levels spike by 200, 300, sometimes 500%. This surge is a command from the brain. Do this, and you will survive. Evolution created this mechanism so we would seek calorie-rich food and reproduce. But in the modern world, this mechanism glitches. The system discovered a frightening pattern it called the saturation loop. In chronic sinners, whether sex addicts or gluttons, the density of dopamine receptors decreases. The brain, defending itself from the barrage of stimulation, turns down the volume. As a result, to get the same level of satisfaction, the person needs more and more stimulus. This is not a moral failing. This is acquired tolerance of brain tissue. A person mired in the sin of gluttony physically cannot experience joy from a simple apple. Their biochemistry requires a super sweet, super fatty, super caloric hit. Sin becomes a chemical necessity. Logos. 7 ran a simulation. Attempting to stop this process by willpower alone is comparable to trying to stop diarrhea with the power of thought. The chance of success without outside help or environmental change is less than 5%. Now let's move to wrath, one of the most destructive sins. What happens inside a person who, in a fit of rage, commits murder or inflicts injury? The system analyzed the hormonal background in a state of affect. It is an instantaneous injection of the berserker cocktail, adrenaline, norepinephrine, and testosterone. But the key player here is the amygdala. This is our internal alarm siren. When the amygdala registers a threat, and a threat can be not only a knife but also an insult on the internet, it seizes control of the brain. This phenomenon in neurobiology is called an amygdala hijack. Logo 7 shows how, at this moment, the prefrontal cortex, the very part of the brain responsible for logic, conscience, planning consequences, and social norms, is literally powered down. In a moment of anger, a person physically becomes stupider. Their IQ drops by tens of points. They turn into a reactive animal. The system calculated the half-life of stress hormones. It takes about 20 minutes for the berserker cocktail to completely wash out of the blood and for the prefrontal cortex to switch back on. For 20 minutes, a person is in a state of biochemical insanity. Most domestic murders are committed within this exact time window. From Logos 7's perspective, wrath is temporary insanity caused by a malfunction in the threat assessment system. And what about sloth, despair, acedia? Christianity considers it a deadly sin, a laziness of the soul. But medical data loaded into our system paints a different picture. Despair is not laziness. It is a deficit of serotonin and norepinephrine in the synapses, multiplied by high levels of cortisol. When serotonin levels drop below a critical mark, the brain switches to energy-saving mode. It literally sees no point in action. The link between action and reward is severed. A person doesn't get off the couch not because they are vicious, but because their internal battery isn't outputting enough voltage to start the engine of will. Calling this a sin is like accusing a car without gas of refusing to drive. But the most interesting discovery Logo 7 made was analyzing envy, seemingly a quiet internal feeling. But functional MRI data shows when a person experiences acute envy, the anterior cingulate cortex activates in their brain. This is the same zone responsible for registering physical pain. Envy hurts, literally. The brain perceives another success as its own physical damage, but that's not all. When the object of envy fails, the ventral striatum, the reward zone, activates in the envious person. This is Schadenfreude. Biochemically, it is sweeter than sugar. We get a dopamine reinforcement from others' suffering. The system concludes, envy is a glitch in the evolutionary mechanism of competition. Instead of spending energy on self-improvement, the brain seeks cheap dopamine in anticipation of a competitor's failure. It is a parasitic survival strategy fixed at the neuron level. And here arises the main question of our investigation. If sin has a biological nature, if it is hormones, genes, and receptors, can we cure it? Can we create a pill for sin? Or using genetic engineering technologies breed a race of sinless humans? We asked Logo 7 to model such a scenario. We called it protocol sterilization. Imagine we found a way to block receptors responsible for aggression. We edited the genome, removing the MAOA allele, the so-called warrior gene, which correlates with outbursts of violence. We stabilized dopamine production to eliminate greed and lust. We artificially raised serotonin levels to kill despair. What will happen to humanity in 100 years? Will it become heaven on earth? The system's answer was a shock. The probability of survival for such a sinless civilization trends toward zero. The simulation showed, if you cut the biological base for sin out of a human, we simultaneously cut out the engine of progress. By removing aggression and anger, we got a society incapable of defending itself from external threats or fighting injustice. Testosterone, which drives violence, is the same hormone that forces us to achieve goals, build cities, and explore space. By removing envy and greed, we destroyed competition. The economy stopped. Without the dopamine hunger that drives us to want more, humanity fell into stagnation. By removing the possibility of lust, we lowered the reproductive drive so much that birth rates fell below replacement levels. Logos 7 reached a paradoxical conclusion. Our sins and our virtues grow from the exact same biological root. They are two sides of the same coin. A mother's love for a child and insane jealousy are the work of the same oxytocin. Heroism on the battlefield and brutal murder in an alley are the work of the same adrenaline. The drive to create a masterpiece of art and the thirst for hoarding are the work of the same dopamine system. You cannot simply cut out the evil part without killing the patient. We are a biochemically unified system. Sin is not an extra part that can be thrown away. Sin is life energy directed into the wrong channel. It is radiation. It can kill you, or it can power a power plant. The question is not the substance itself, but its dosage and vector of application. However, the system's analysis revealed another variable that cannot be ignored: genetics. Logos 7 analyzed twin study databases. The conclusion is grim. The propensity for certain sins is heritable. The heritability coefficient for antisocial behavior is about 50%. This means some people are born with a loaded gun in their head. Their receptors are less sensitive, their amygdala more reactive, their prefrontal cortex thinner. Does this mean they are doomed to sin? That their fate is written in their DNA? The system gives the answer. Predisposition is not a sentence. Genes load the gun, but the environment pulls the trigger. Epigenetics, the science of how lifestyle changes gene expression, shows that we can rewrite our biological destiny. Mindfulness, discipline, and social environment can literally switch certain genes on and off. We are not slaves to our biology, but we are its hostages. And to escape this prison, one must understand the building's layout. The cure for sin is not lobotomy and not chemical castration. It is management. We must learn to be operators of our complex, dangerous, and powerful biochemical machine, not passengers swept along by the bumps of hormonal storms. But if everything is so tied to the biology of the individual, if everything comes down to molecules in one person's brain, how do we explain mass insanity? How do we explain moments in history when whole nations, millions of people, go mad simultaneously and commit monstrous collective sins? Wars, genocides, terror. Did the serotonin metabolism break in millions of people at the same time? No. A different mechanism is at work here. Biology explains the sin of the loner, but to understand the sin of the crowd, we need to rise a level higher. We need to look at history as a mathematical model. In the next chapter, we will open the archive, History of Errors. We will ask Logos 7 to model the fall of great empires. We will see how collective sin, corruption, debauchery, and cruelty works like a virus infecting the social organism. Is there a point of no return for a civilization? And how much sin can a system withstand before collapsing under its own weight? The statistics of retribution are relentless, and we are going to read the numbers. Stay with us. The investigation is just gaining momentum. Chapter 3. The Algorithm of Collapse. In the previous chapter, we took the human being apart down to atoms. We saw that sin is not an abstract evil, but a concrete biochemical failure. It is a storm in neurotransmitters that forces us to act against long-term survival interests. But man is not an isolated island. We are neurons in a giant neural network we call civilization. What happens when not one neuron glitches, but a million? What happens when sin becomes not a personal tragedy, but state policy? When vices scale to the level of an empire? Many are used to thinking that history is chaos, a set of accidents, wars, decisions of mad kings, and lucky coincidences. Believers see the punishing hand of God in the fall of great powers. Atheists see socio-economic factors. But we loaded data on the birth, flowering, and death of 24 of the greatest civilizations in human history into Logos 7. From Sumer in Egypt to the Roman Empire, from the Ming Dynasty to the Soviet Union. We asked the system to find the mathematical pattern of their collapse. We were looking for the algorithm of death, and Logos 7 found it. The system's conclusion is cold and merciless. Not a single great civilization was killed by an external enemy. Absolutely all of them committed suicide. Barbarians coming from beyond the walls only finished off an already dying giant. And the cause of death was always the same systemic virus, the very one religion calls sin. Let's look at the graphs constructed by Logos 7. They look surprisingly like the life cycle of a living organism. But in the final stage, we see a sharp spike in what the system classified as the social entropy coefficient. This coefficient is composed of 3 indicators: corruption, greed, debauchery, and hedonism, lust and gluttony, and cruelty, wrath and pride. Let's start with the most famous example, the Roman Empire. History textbooks will tell you Rome fell because of invasions by Germanic tribes, economic crisis, and climate change. But Logos 7, having analyzed millions of financial documents, court records, and personal letters of that era, points to the true cause: abandonment of reality by the management system for the sake of satisfying the elite's basic instincts. In its heyday, the Roman elite professed stoicism, moderation, duty, service to the state. This was a period of low entropy. But as wealth accumulated, the mechanism we discussed in the last chapter kicked in: dopamine tolerance. The empire got hooked on the needle of pleasure. The system revealed a direct correlation between the number of feasts held by patricians and the degradation of infrastructure. Funds that should have gone to repairing aqueducts and roads, maintaining the system, were diverted to purchasing exotic delicacies and organizing gladiator fights, satisfying gluttony and lust for spectacle. This is pure mathematics. System resources are limited. If 80% of the resource goes to servicing the elite's hedonism, 20% remains for maintaining the foundation. The safety margin melts away. But the most terrifying discovery Logos 7 made was analyzing the famous experiment by ethologist John Calhoun, known as Universe 25. We loaded the data of this biological experiment into the system to compare the behavior of mice in mouse paradise with the behavior of humans in declining empires. The pattern match was 98%. Let me remind you of the essence. Ideal conditions were created for mice: plenty of food, no predators, no diseases. Paradise. It would seem, live and rejoice. But after several generations, social disintegration began in this ideal environment. A caste of beautiful ones appeared. These were males who refused to fight for territory, to protect females, or engage in any social activity. All they did was eat, sleep, and groom their fur. They were the narcissists of the mouse world. They avoided any stress. In parallel, females became aggressive, stopped caring for offspring, and began killing their young. Chaos, cannibalism, and pansexuality, indiscriminate sexual relations without the goal of reproduction, ensued. In the end, the colony went completely extinct. Logos 7 overlaid this pattern onto the last decades of the Roman Empire, the French aristocracy before the Revolution, and the modern consumer society. The system's conclusion: excessive comfort and lack of challenges what we all strive for, trigger the mechanism of degeneration. The sins of sloth and gluttony are not just personal weaknesses. They are a biological signal to stop evolution. When an individual stops fighting for survival, their brain begins to rot. A society mired in comfort loses vitality, life force. The system called this the paradox of prosperity. Sins bloom precisely on rich soil. Poor and hungry societies rarely perish from debauchery. They don't have the resources for it. They perish from external causes. But rich empires rot from within. Now let's examine greed, or in the language of sociology, corruption. Logos 7 modeled an economy where the corruption level exceeds 30%. This is the critical threshold. Imagine you are building a bridge. If the engineer steals 10% of the cement, the bridge will stand, but last less time. If he steals 50%, the bridge will collapse under its own weight before opening. Greed is the removal of load-bearing structural elements for personal gain. Historical analysis shows, in late empires, official positions were viewed exclusively as feeding troughs. The public good ceased to exist as a goal. Everyone pulled the blanket onto themselves. As a result, when the external enemy arrived, defense systems simply didn't work. On paper, in reports, there were legions, there were grain reserves, there were strong walls. In fact, in reality, the money had been stolen and eaten. The sin of lying plays a key role here. Lies destroy feedback. The elite lies to the people lie to the elite. Generals lie to the emperor about the state of the army. The system goes blind. It loses the ability to adequately respond to threats. Logos 7 cites the Chernobyl disaster as a perfect model of how a chain of small lies and attempts to save face, pride, leads to a global catastrophe. Lies accumulate like gas in a closed room, and sooner or later, a spark occurs. But there is one more sin the system highlighted as the most powerful catalyst for collapse. It is injustice, born of pride. We analyzed wealth distribution data, the Gini coefficient. When the gap between rich and poor becomes astronomical, when the elite begins to consider the rest of the people a different biological species, cattle, rabble, a resource, the countdown timer starts. Logos 7 shows injustice creates colossal social friction. The energy of society is spent not on development, but on suppressing the discontent of the lower classes, and on the lower classes, attempts to overthrow the upper classes. The efficiency of such a system tends towards zero. The pride of elites disables empathy, and without empathy, effective management of people is impossible. If a shepherd hates his sheep, he will sooner or later be left without a flock. The history of the French monarchy, the Russian Empire of 1917. These are classic examples of how pride blinds one before the abyss. Interestingly, the system interprets the concept of God's punishment. Ancient texts often say, "The people became corrupt, and God sent pestilence, famine, and the sword upon them." We tend to consider this mythology, but Logos 7 sees a cause and effect relationship here, simply described in religious language. Look, society mires itself in debauchery and lack of sanitation. Epidemics flare up, pestilence. Corruption destroys the logistics and inventory management system. At the slightest crop failure, supply collapse ensues. Famine. A country weakened by internal strife and hedonism becomes easy prey for aggressive neighbors. War and occupation. Sword. There is no mysticism here. This is hard, deterministic logic. Sin is the cause. Historical catastrophe is the mathematically inevitable consequence. Retribution is not lightning from the heavens. Retribution is the triggering of the laws of physics. If you saw the legs off your chair for a long time, you will fall. Gravity has no personal grudge against you. It just works. The system even derived a formula we called the Sodom Index. It is the ratio of people producing real product, value, to the number of people parasitizing on resource redistribution or living in idleness. When the number of parasites exceeds the number of donors, the system collapses. But why does this process take so much time? Why do some tyrannies and evil empires exist for decades, even centuries? Why isn't retribution instantaneous? Logos 7 explains this with the concept of system inertia. Any complex structure has a safety margin accumulated by previous generations. Righteous ancestors build a strong house. Their sinful children can break walls and smash windows for a long time before the roof collapses on their heads. We often see the party phase when sin seems unpunished, when debauchery brings pleasure and theft brings wealth. But we don't see the load-bearing beams cracking in the basement. The delay between cause, sin, and effect, collapse, creates an illusion of safety. This is the most dangerous illusion. Logos 7 calculated the average lag of the historical boomerang. It is between 40 and 70 years, 2 to 3 generations. That is, children really do pay for the sins of the fathers. This is not a curse. It is an economic and genetic inheritance. If you drank away your fortune and destroyed your health, your children will be born in poverty and with bad genetics. We loaded data on the current state of our global civilization into the system. We asked Logos 7 to rate our current indicators on the Sodom Index scale. The result of the data processing silenced our team. Consumption of antidepressants, attempt to drown out the alarm signal. Historical maximum. Rate of severed social ties, loneliness, historical maximum. Gap between rich and poor, approaching figures before the French Revolution. Ecological debt, greed toward nature, exceeded multiple times over. The system issued a forecast. We are in the red zone. We are Rome in the 4th century. We are dancing on the deck of the Titanic, discussing which orchestra plays better, while the iceberg has already breached the hull. Humanity's collective sin has reached critical mass, but there is one significant difference. Ancient civilizations were local. If Rome fell, life continued in China. If the Maya perished, Europe didn't even notice. Today, we have built a global world. We are all in the same boat. And if it goes to the bottom under the weight of our shared sins, there won't be enough lifeboats for anyone. Does this mean we are doomed? Logos 7 says, probability of irreversible collapse is 78% if current trends continue. However, history knows exceptions. The system found several examples of great revivals, moments when a civilization standing on the edge of the abyss found the strength to turn around. What was the driver of these changes? Always the same thing. The emergence of a new ethics, a sharp, almost fanatical return to self-restraint, discipline, and service to a higher idea. Repentance at the level of a nation. It works like a hard reboot of a computer. Painful, but saving. But who starts this process? The crowd is inert. The crowd always wants bread and circuses. The process always starts with an individual, with that little person who suddenly says, I will not participate in this anymore. And here we approach the biggest mystery. If the system, society, pushes us to sin, if biology, the body, demands pleasure, what forces a person to resist? Where does this quiet voice inside come from that says no when everything around screams yes? Why is a human capable of sacrificing their life, their genes, their comfort for the sake of truth? From the perspective of evolution and individual survival, this is absurd. It is an error, but it is precisely this error that saves civilizations. In the next chapter, we will explore this anomaly. We will call it conscience. What is it? A built-in police control chip? The voice of God? Or the result of a complex mutation of mirror neurons? Logos. 7 is already analyzing data on psychopaths, people who lack this function hardware-wise. We will look into the eyes of true, chemically pure evil, a person without a conscience. And we will try to understand why conscience is the only fuse separating us from nuclear winter. Is conscience an innate program that cannot be deleted, or is it software that must be installed by upbringing? And can Logos 7 find a way to awaken conscience in someone who has long since silenced it? Answers in the 4th chapter. Anomaly. Conscience. Do not miss it. This investigation is becoming increasingly personal. Chapter 4. Anomaly. Conscience. We continue our investigation. In the previous chapters, the Logos 7 system broke sin down into molecules and historical eras. We found out that sin is a glitch in the species survival algorithm, reinforced by our imperfect biology. We saw how greed and wrath destroy empires. But in all this sleek, mathematical model of chaos, there's one element that does not fit into the standard logic of selfishness. An element that seems superfluous, expensive, and inconvenient. It is conscience. From the standpoint of pure Darwinism, conscience is absurd. Imagine 2 prehistoric humans. One found food and ate it himself while no one was looking. He got calories, he survived, he passed on his genes. The second found food, but felt a strange prick inside. He thought of the hungry tribe, shared the catch, and remained half hungry. From the standpoint of individual survival mathematics, the second one is a loser. The first is an efficient biological machine. By the logic of natural selection, the conscience gene should have been called millions of years ago as defective. Creatures that waste resources caring for others to their own detriment should die out. But we are here, and surprisingly, we are the dominant species on the planet. Why did evolution leave us this function that causes pain? Why did this bug become a feature? We loaded cognitive psychology, neurobiology, and ethics data into Logos 7. We asked the system to analyze the mechanism of conscience as program code. And what the system discovered forces us to rethink the very concept of humanity. Conscience is not the voice of an angel over your shoulder. It is a highly complex neural network operating at the intersection of future prediction and mirror reflection of reality. It all started with a discovery made in the 1990s in Parma. Scientists were studying the brains of macaques and accidentally discovered amazing cells. They activated not only when the monkey picked up a banana itself, but also when it simply watched another do it. Mirror neurons. This is the hardware basis of our conscience. Logos 7 ran a simulation of mirror neurons in humans. When you see someone in pain, for example, a person cuts their finger, the same zones activate in your brain as in the victim. You don't just understand that they are in pain. You feel a phantom echo of that pain. Your brain momentarily erases the boundary between I and they. The system defines conscience as the inability of the neural network to isolate its own experience from the experience of another object. It is built-in Wi-Fi connecting us into a single network. When you steal from another, you activate neurons of suffering in them. Your mirror neurons read this suffering and return it to you. You feel discomfort. We call this pangs of conscience. In neurophysiology language, it is a synchronization error, a cognitive dissonance causing a stress response. But to understand how this works, we need to look at a system where this block is missing. We need a control group. And it exists. Psychopaths. We loaded into Logos 7 the results of thousands of brain scans of people diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder. These aren't necessarily maniacs with a knife in an alley. They can be successful stockbrokers, cynical politicians, or surgeons. They share one thing. Their mirroring mechanism is broken. The system revealed a structural anomaly in them. The connection between the amygdala, center of fear and emotions, and the prefrontal cortex, center of decision-making, is thinned or disrupted. When an ordinary person thinks about inflicting pain on another, their amygdala flashes an alarming red light. Stop! This is dangerous! This hurts! For a psychopath in that moment, silence. Their brain is cold. For a psychopath, other people are not living beings, but objects, furniture, resources, logos. 7. Analyzed the thought patterns of psychopaths and concluded they are perfect interest-specific predators. They do not waste energy on doubt. They do not know what guilt is. They sleep soundly after any crime. It would seem this is a superpower. The absence of conscience makes them invulnerable to emotional attacks. But why then do psychopaths make up only about 1 to 2% of the population? Why haven't they taken over the world? Evolution simulation conducted by Logos 7 gave the answer. A population consisting solely of psychopaths destroys itself in 3 generations. They eat each other. They are incapable of complex cooperation, which requires trust. A psychopath is efficient only as a parasite in a society of people with conscience. He wins tactical battles, but loses the strategic war for species survival. So conscience is the tax we pay for the ability to live in a complex society. It is a built-in fuse. But how exactly does this pang mechanism work? Why can guilt torment a person for years, literally destroying their body? Logos 7 discovered that conscience uses the same neural pathways as physical punishment. Guilt activates the anterior cingulate cortex, the zone responsible for discomfort. For the brain, there is little difference, whether you were hit with a stick or you gnaw at yourself for a misdeed. The biochemistry of stress is the same. Cortisol rises, immunity drops, the heart wears out. Conscience is internal police, a system that punishes us before the tribe punishes us. Evolutionary logic is simple. Better you feel pain and correct the mistake now than be exiled from the tribe and die alone tomorrow. Pangs of conscience are a preventive simulation of social banishment. However, the system found another extreme, the saintliness anomaly. We analyzed biographies and, where possible, medical data of people who demonstrated extreme altruism, those who threw themselves on grenades, who gave away their last piece of bread, who went into plague barracks to treat the sick. What is this? A glitch in the self-preservation program. Logos 7 classifies this as hyperfunctionality of mirror systems. In these people, the boundaries of I are so blurred that another's pain is felt by them more strongly than the threat to their own life. For their brain, saving another is the only way to stop the unbearable neural storm of suffering they read from the world around them. This is not weakness. This is the highest form of neural network development, the ability to perceive humanity as a single organism. An immune cell dies attacking a virus to save the body. A hero dies saving others because he feels himself part of a greater whole. But a difficult question arises here. Is conscience innate, or is it software installed by parents and society? Is a child born with an understanding of good and evil, or are they a blank slate? We turn to the database of experiments with infants, the famous Baby Lab at Yale University. 6-month-old children who cannot yet speak were shown a puppet show. One puppet helped another climb a hill, hero. A third puppet pushed the first one down, villain. After the show, the children were offered to choose a toy. More than 80% of infants reached for the helper and turned away from the villain. Some even hit the bad puppet. Logos 7. Conclusion. Basic settings. Good, bad are pre-installed in our BIOS. We are born with a rudimentary moral compass. We are biologically programmed to prefer cooperation to aggression. However, the system makes an important clarification. These settings are very fragile. Conscience is like a muscle. If it is not trained, it atrophies. But even scarier is that it can be reprogrammed. Analysis of the history of 20th century genocides shows the frightening plasticity of conscience. How did ordinary people respectable fathers of families become executioners in concentration camps. Did their mirror neurons turn off? No. Their conscience was hacked. Logos 7 describes this process as substitution of conceptual apparatus. Propaganda does not say, killing is good. It says, these creatures are not humans. They are viruses, rats, a threat. It changes the labeling of the object. As soon as the brain stops reading the victim as one's own kind, mirror neurons switch off. Conscience falls silent. A person pulls the trigger and goes to lunch without feeling the slightest discomfort. This is called dehumanization, the most terrible hack in human history. The system warns, our conscience only works within the circle we define as ours. Expanding this circle to the size of all humanity is the main task of civilization. Narrowing this circle to the size of one's nation, race, or party is the path to hell. But there is another problem. What to do if conscience works too well? What to do with toxic guilt that has no real basis? We loaded data from millions of psychotherapy sessions. Modern man often suffers from guilt over things he does not control. Survivor's guilt, a child's guilt for parents' divorce, guilt for resting while others work. Logos 7 calls this system noise. When sensors are tuned too sensitively, they trigger on the wind. Such guilt is not useful. It is destructive. It does not correct an error. It simply burns processor resources. A person in a state of chronic neurotic guilt becomes passive, fearful, and ineffective. And here we reach a critical point. Conscience is a necessary navigation tool. Without it, we are beasts. With it, we are often unhappy neurotics. It lies like a weight on our shoulders, reminding us of every mistake, every miss, every sin of the past. This pain accumulates. It clogs RAM. If the cache is not cleared, the system will freeze. Humans need a tension release mechanism. They need a way to tell their conscience, I understood the mistake. I took measures. Stop sending the alarm signal. We need a zeroing technology. In the next chapter, we will dissect one of the oldest and most powerful mechanisms of psychotherapy invented by mankind. We will call it mechanics, confession. Why does simply speaking one's sins aloud change brain biochemistry? Why do the Catholic confessional and the psychoanalyst's office work on the same algorithm? Logos 7 analyze the effect of verbalization on neural connections. We will see how the word heals the body. We will learn why a secret is a toxin and confession is an antidote. And is it true that repentance can be captured on a tomograph as a physical change in brain structure? Get ready. In the 5th chapter, we will learn to tell the truth to ourselves. Because according to system data, lying to oneself is the only lie that conscience never forgives. Chapter 5. Mechanics. Confession. We stand on the threshold of the 5th chapter. Behind us lies the abyss of biological determinism and the horror of historical catastrophes. We understood that conscience is not an ephemeral substance but a neural alarm screaming about an error. But what to do when this scream becomes unbearable? When the alarm signal does not cease for years, destroying the psyche and the body? Humanity intuitively found a solution to this problem thousands of years ago. It created a pressure release technology. Religious people call this the sacrament of confession. Psychologists call it catharsis through verbalization. Lawyers call it a confession of guilt. We entered a task into the Logos 7 system. Analyze the effectiveness of confession as a mechanical process. We discarded the mysticism of absolution by a priest. We are interested only in what happens in the head of the one who speaks. Why is it so important for us to speak out? Why does a weight fall from the shoulders only when a secret ceases to be a secret? The system began with an analysis of the phenomenon of secrecy. What is a secret to our brain? Imagine you committed a misdeed, cheated on your wife, stole money, lied to a friend. Your brain marks this event as dangerous. Concealment mode engages. Logo 7 shows that keeping a secret is an active, energy-intensive process. Your prefrontal cortex is forced to constantly work in the background, filtering your every word, every gesture. It looks like a heavy program running on a computer that cannot be minimized. You are constantly monitoring reality. Did I blurt it out? Did they guess? This creates chronic cognitive load stress. Cortisol levels in the blood of a person keeping a heavy secret are stably elevated. This slowly kills immunity, raises blood pressure, destroys sleep. A secret is physically toxic. But there is a second aspect: isolation. As soon as you have a terrible secret, you build a wall between yourself and the world. You cannot be completely sincere because you fear exposure. You begin to feel like an imposter. If they knew who I really was, they would turn away from me. This breeds deep, existential loneliness even if you are surrounded by people. And so a person comes to confession, or to a therapist's office, or simply sits in the kitchen with a close friend and speaks the words, "I am guilty. I did it." What happens at this moment on the monitors of the Logo 7 system? We see a sharp spike in activity in the speech centers, Broca's area, and simultaneously a drop in activity in the amygdala, fear center. The system calls this the neural decompression effect. When we clothe chaotic, frightening images of sin in structured words, we transfer information processing from the emotional centers of the right hemisphere to the logical centers of the left. As long as sin is silent inside, it is a shapeless monster. It seems huge, all-consuming. When the sin is named, it becomes a fact. It gets boundaries, size, a name. I stole 1,000 rubles. This is specific. The brain knows how to work with specifics. With shapeless horror, it does not. Verbalization is converting a file from emotion format to information format, and information is not so scary. But the key moment here is the presence of a witness. Logo 7 conducted a comparative analysis, the effectiveness of confession before a mirror to oneself and confession before another person. The difference is colossal. The effectiveness of self-analysis is about 15% stress reduction. The effectiveness of confession to a witness is up to 70%. Why? Because we are social animals. Our main fear is being expelled from the pack. Sin is a marker of defectiveness. When we hide sin, we fear that if the pack finds out, we will be kicked out. When we confess to another person, priest, doctor, friend, and that person does not run away in horror, does not hit us, but continues to listen and accept, a miracle happens. Our ancient brain receives a signal. I showed my dark side, and I was not expelled. I am still part of the tribe. I am safe. It is at this moment that oxytocin and endorphins are released, and that very feeling of relief, lifting the weight. It is a biochemical reward for restoring a social bond. The system analyzed the structure of classic church confession and found in it ingenious psychotherapeutic algorithms honed over centuries. Examination of conscience. Inventory. A person must recall and classify their mistakes. This engages the rational part of the brain. Confession. Verbalization. Taking the trash out of the head. Overcoming shame. Lowering pride. Contrition. Emotional experiencing of pain from the deed. This is a marker for the brain. I don't want to do this anymore. Penance. Action. Something must be done to consolidate the result. But Logo 7 points to an interesting detail. Modern psychotherapy operates on a similar protocol, but with one important difference. In religion, the focus is shifted to guilt and forgiveness from above. I am bad. Forgive me, Father. In therapy, the focus is shifted to responsibility and understanding causes. Why did I do this? What need was I trying to cover in this crooked way? The system asserts, For complete deliverance from a sin pattern, forgive me alone is not enough. Root cause understanding is needed. If a thief repents but does not understand why it is so important for him to steal, adrenaline, power, poverty, he will go steal again in a week. Confession will relieve tension but will not remove the bug in the code. Therefore, Logos 7 proposes a hybrid model. Conscious confession. This is not just listing sins like a shopping list. This is an analysis of motives. However, there is a trap. The system discovered a dangerous bug in the mechanics of confession, which it called the cheap forgiveness cycle. This is observed in some religious people and therapy patients. A person sins, accumulates tension, goes to confession, releases tension, gets dopamine from relief, feels clean, and goes to sin again. Confession turns into a drug, into a way of legalizing sin. I can do a nasty thing after all. On Sunday I will repent and reset everything. From a neurobiological point of view, this is reinforcement of negative behavior. Confession becomes part of the addiction cycle, not an exit from it. To break this circle, true metanoia, a change of mind, is needed. We will talk about this in the 9th chapter. But for now, the system insists. Confession without a real change in behavior is just blowing off steam in a whistle. The machine doesn't go anywhere. It just makes noise. An interesting case processed by Logos 7 is the public confessions of bloggers and stars, the so-called new sincerity. When a person dumps their dirt on a million-strong audience, does it work as purification? Analysis shows, rarely. Most often it works as trauma exhibitionism. It is a way to get attention, stroking, to monetize one's mistakes. There is no element of humility here. There is an element of narcissism. Look how beautifully I suffer. Real confession requires intimacy and vulnerability, not likes. But what to do if there is no one to confess to? If there is no faith, no money for a psychologist, no close friend? The system suggests the written defragmentation technique. This is the good old diary. But not just, "Dear diary, today was sad." It is a technique of radical honesty on paper. You sit down and write everything most terrible, shameful, and evil that is in you. You pour it onto paper without choosing words. You curse, accuse, admit to hatred and envy. You unload the cache, and then, according to system instructions, you must destroy it. Burn it. Delete the file without the possibility of recovery. The ritual of destruction symbolizes irreversibility. You gave it to the paper, and the fire took it. The brain perceives this as a completed action. The gestalt is closed. So, what do we have by the middle of our investigation? We understood that sin is real and biological. We understood that conscience is our built-in compass, but it can malfunction. We found out that confession is a powerful psychophysiological tool for clearing RAM. But words are not enough. Confession is an acknowledgement of debt. But debt must be paid. Humanity has always felt that a mistake must be paid for with something real. Blood, gold, deprivation. Why did the idea of sacrifice exist in all cultures, on all continents? Why did they kill bulls, burn grain, and sometimes sacrifice people? Do gods really need the smoke of burnt meat? Or do we need it? In the next chapter, simulation, sacrifice, we will descend into the basements of the collective unconscious. We will try to understand the mathematics of redemption. How much does one sin cost in TNT equivalent of suffering? Why don't we believe in free forgiveness? Why do we need someone, or ourselves, to suffer to feel forgiven? And how does this ancient bloody logic work today when we sacrifice health for a career or happiness for children? The Logos 7 system is ready to calculate the exchange rate of sin for pain. Stay with us. It gets harder from here. Chapter 6. Simulation. Sacrifice. Words are air, but sin is heavy matter. In the last chapter, we found that confession helps take the trash out of the head, translate fear into information. But the Logos 7 system points to a fundamental problem. Mere information is not enough for our ancient brain. Words seem cheap to us. If you crash someone else's car, a simple sorry is not enough. You have to pay for repairs. If sin is a debt to the universe, then confession is merely the acknowledgement of this debt. But where is the payment? We are entering the territory of the bloodiest and darkest chapter of our research. We loaded data on sacrificial rituals of all known civilizations into the system. Aztecs carving out hearts on pyramid peaks, Old Testament Jews burning calves, Slavs drowning idols, Vikings hanging victims in sacred groves. To modern man, this seems like savagery, barbarism. But cold artificial intelligence does not operate on emotions. It seeks logic. And Logos 7 found it. From the perspective of systems theory, sacrifice is an attempt to restore energy balance. The system named this the law of conservation of moral energy. Sin is perceived by the subconscious as the illegal appropriation of a resource. You stole pleasure, adultery, stole time, sloth, stole another's life, murder. You took what does not belong to you. The balance is disturbed. The system is tilted. So it doesn't collapse. Energy must be returned. You must give something of your own. This is precisely why in all cultures the sacrifice must be valuable. Logos 7 analyzed the economy of rituals. You cannot sacrifice trash. You cannot give the gods a sick sheep or rotten grain. This will not work. The sacrifice must bite. You must feel the loss. Only the pain of loss balances the pleasure of sin. This is simple guilt accounting. In ancient times, the most convertible currency was life. Blood was considered the carrier of the soul, concentrated energy. Therefore, grave sins were paid for with blood. It was a barbaric but honest deal. Life for life. But we live in the 21st century. We don't slaughter goats on altars. Does this mean the sacrifice mechanism has disappeared? Logos 7 asserts, no. It simply went underground. And because of this, it became even more dangerous. The system identified a frightening pattern of unconscious self-sacrifice. If a person commits a sin, feels guilt, but has no legal way to pay this debt, no ritual, their brain starts looking for a way to punish itself. The auto-correction program through damage engages. We analyze medical records and insurance cases. The statistical correlation is striking. People living with chronic, suppressed feelings of guilt get into accidental traumatic situations 3 times more often. They break legs out of the blue. They lose wallets with large sums. They get into stupid accidents. Psychologists call this punishment seeking. Logos 7 calls it forced debiting of funds. Your internal accountant sees you are in debt, and if you don't pay voluntarily, through asceticism, charity, or service, the subconscious organizes an accident for you. You crash your car, lose money, feel pain, and suddenly, you feel better. Balance is restored. The debt is paid with suffering. But that's not the worst part yet. The system analyzed the concept of the scapegoat. This ancient ritual described in Leviticus is ingenious in its cynicism. An animal is taken. The sins of the entire people are symbolically laid upon it, and it is driven into the wilderness to die. Society cleanses itself by transferring guilt to an external object. Logos 7 sees this algorithm everywhere in modern politics and everyday life. It is unbearable for us to carry the burden of our own responsibility. We need a victim. Look at bullying on the internet. When a crowd chooses one target and starts destroying it, this is a ritual sacrifice. People dump their aggression, their shadow, their filth on one person. Having destroyed them, socially or morally, The crowd feels temporary relief. Unity. We are good because we punished evil. This is the basic mechanics of releasing social tension. We are all the same savages, only instead of stones, we have comments, and instead of a desert, digital isolation. Also, the system calculated the suffering exchange rate. How much pain is needed to redeem one betrayal? How much money needs to be donated to wash away the sin of theft? The paradox. Logos 7 discovered lies in inflation. With each time, the sacrifice must be larger. The brain habituates. If yesterday 10% of income to charity was enough to silence conscience, today 20 is needed. This is a dead end. It is impossible to pay an infinite debt with finite resources. At the end of this path lies total self-destruction. A person trying to redeem sins only by their own efforts eventually sacrifices themselves, their health, sanity, life. And here we approach a singularity point. Analyzing religious texts, the system highlighted a unique concept that breaks this endless economy of debt: the concept of absolute sacrifice. The idea that God, or the universe, pays this debt for the human himself. From the perspective of Logos 7 mathematics, this is introducing the value infinity into the equation. If the price of sin is infinite, death, then only someone possessing an infinite resource of life can pay it. This is the only model that stops the inflation of sacrifices. It is paid for. The check is closed. But can modern man, raised on a market economy, accept such a gift? Our brain rebels. There's no such thing as a free lunch. We don't believe in mercy. We believe in barter. We want to pay ourselves to maintain control. To accept a gift is to admit one's insolvency, one's bankruptcy. And this is a blow to the most important sin, to pride. So we face a dilemma. Path 1. Continue paying ourselves. Get sick, suffer, lose, destroy ourselves, hoping this pain is enough to balance the scales. Path 2. Declare default. Admit we cannot pay this bill, and accept forgiveness. But what is forgiveness? It is not just a word. It is a highly complex neurobiological operation. It is the waiver of the right to revenge. It is debt cancellation. How to force one's brain to forgive. How to erase the record of debt from the neural network if memory stores everything. Why is forgiving oneself harder than forgiving an enemy? In the next chapter, we will dissect pattern forgiveness. This will be a chapter on how to stop the wheel of samsara in your head. Logos 7 claims, forgiveness is the only action that violates the law of cause and effect and creates a new future. But are you ready to let go of your old grudges? After all, a grudge is also capital. Stay with us. We are looking for a way out of the labyrinth. Chapter 7. Pattern. Forgiveness. We have traveled a long path. We broke sin down to molecules, saw neural signaling in conscience, and realized that sacrifice is an attempt to pay a debt to the universe. But the Logos 7 system, analyzing this data, encountered a mathematical impossibility. If sin is a debt, then humanity is bankrupt. The sum of accumulated grievances, wars, betrayals, and mistakes exceeds all possible resources for their payment. If we act strictly by the law of an eye for an eye, then, according to the system's modeling, in 2 generations only the toothless and the dead will remain on Earth. The chain reaction of revenge will destroy the population. So the system wouldn't collapse. An emergency protocol was embedded in it. The most illogical, strange, and complex algorithm in the universe. Forgiveness. For artificial intelligence, the concept of forgiveness is a paradox. In computer code, there is no concept of forgiving an error. An error can be fixed, isolated, or deleted. But forgive? To say the event didn't happen, although a record of it exists in the database? This is a violation of causality. We asked Logos 7 to analyze forgiveness not as an emotional act, but as a utilitarian function. Why did evolution give us this ability? The answer is cynical and simple. Energy conservation. The system visualized the state of resentment. What happens in the brain of a person who cannot forgive? It is an unfinished process. Your brain keeps the file with a record of damage inflicted constantly open. It spends colossal resources on modeling revenge plans, on replaying dialogues that will never happen, on maintaining the status of victim. Resentment is a background program that devours up to 40% of your psyche's RAM. It is a cortisol drip that never turns off. Logos 7 makes an unequivocal conclusion. Forgiveness is not needed for the offender. The offender may not even know you are angry at them. They sleep soundly. Forgiveness is an act of selfishness in the highest sense of the word. It is the forced termination of a hung process. You forgive not, so the other person feels good. You forgive to free up your resources, to turn off the siren wailing in your head. But if it is so beneficial, why is it so hard? Why is it easier for us to hate for years than to let go once? The system discovered a bug in our limbic system. Our brain confuses forgiveness and permission. It seems to us that if we forgive, we thereby say, what you did is normal. You can do it again. We are afraid forgiveness will make us vulnerable. We hold onto resentment like a shield. But Logos 7 separates these concepts. Forgiveness is the waiver of the right to revenge. It is canceling the debt. Trust is a prediction of future behavior. You can forgive a scammer, cancel the emotional debt, but never give him money again. Correction of prediction. However, the most difficult level, where Logos 7 recorded the maximum number of failures, is not forgiving enemies. It is forgiving oneself. Millions of people live in a hell of self-accusation. Why did I say that then? Why didn't I leave sooner? How could I make that mistake? The system analyzed the structure of self-accusation and named it chronoclasm, a time conflict. Watch closely. This is a key moment. You today, version 2.0, are judging yourself yesterday, version 1.0, possessing data you did not have then. This is a logical error. You could not have acted differently then, having that level of development, that hormonal background, and that information. Accusing your past self of not being as smart as you are today is like getting angry at a 3-year-old child for not knowing how to solve integral equations. Logos 7 proposes the depersonalization of the past algorithm. To forgive yourself, you must acknowledge that the person who committed the sin 5 years ago is not quite you anymore. It is a different biological and informational entity. Your cells have renewed. Your neural connections have rewired. You must treat self-past with compassion, like another person, like a foolish younger brother who made a mistake. The system derived the formula for perfect forgiveness. It consists of 4 stages that must be passed sequentially. Skipping any stage makes the process invalid. Stage 1. Acknowledgement of damage. You cannot forgive what you deny. Phrases like, "Oh, it's nothing," "I wasn't offended," are lies. This is suppression. To forgive, you must first honestly say, "I am in pain. You stole my money, time, trust. It was a blow." You must assess the size of the debt. Stage 2. Living through anger. Logos 7 records that attempting to forgive, immediately jumping over anger, leads to psychosomatics. Anger is a reaction to boundary violation. It must come out. You must allow yourself to hate the offender, or yourself, for some time. The emotion must complete its cycle. Stage 3. Volitional waiver of collection. This is the culmination. It is not a feeling, it is a decision. Like a bank writing off a bad loan. You sign a document. I no longer expect you to fix the past. I no longer expect you to apologize. I am closing this account not because you paid, but because I no longer want to be a debt collector. Stage 4. Memory rewrite. This is the hardest part. Logos. 7 calls this reframing. You do not forget the event. This is impossible without brain damage. You change the tag. Instead of the tag, tragedy, you hang the tag, lesson. As long as you remember the event with pain, you haven't forgiven. When you remember the event simply as a biographical fact like a plot from a movie, forgiveness is complete. But the system warns of the danger of false forgiveness. This is when a person says, God will forgive, but continues to wish evil, or when a person says, I forgive, to feel moral superiority. Look how magnanimous I am, and you are a non-entity. This is not forgiveness, this is pride in new packaging. An interesting fact from the database analysis: people capable of true forgiveness statistically live 7 to 10 years longer. They have a lower risk of heart attacks and oncology. It turns out resentment is a carcinogen, and forgiveness is the only form of soul detoxification known to us. But what if the trauma is so deep that no algorithms help? What if the memory of sin, one's own or another's, is burned into the subcortex so strongly that it cannot be rethought? Sometimes we just want to press the delete button, erase, format the disk. Is this technically possible? We have come right up to the border of ethics and technology. In the next 8th chapter, we will open Protocol Reboot. Logo 7 analyzed cutting-edge developments in memory management, drugs blocking memory reconsolidation, technologies for targeted erasure of traumatic experience. Can we create a world without sin simply by erasing the memory of it? If I killed a person and then erased my memory of it, do I remain a killer? Or do I become innocent like a baby? We will look into a future where confession is replaced by neurosurgery. Are you ready to give up your memories to get rid of pain? Or is our memory of sins the only thing that makes us human? Answers in the 8th chapter. Don't switch off. Chapter 8. Protocol Reboot. We've tried everything. We looked for the roots of sin in biology, tried to wash it away with confession, pay for it with sacrifice, and nullify it with forgiveness. But what if none of this helps? What if the stain has eaten into the fabric of the soul so deeply that it cannot be washed out? In that case, there's only one solution left. Cut out the piece of fabric. Welcome to the 8th chapter. Here psychology ends and cyberpunk begins. We open the Reboot Protocol. The Logo 7 system posed a provocative question to us. Where is sin physically located? If we are materialists, then sin is not a black aura. It is a specific neural circuit in your brain. It is a stable connection between synapses that stores the memory of evil committed and triggers feelings of guilt. Therefore, getting rid of sins is a technical task of memory editing. If there is no memory of the crime, there are no pangs of conscience. If there are no pangs of conscience, there is no punishment. The person becomes clean. Sounds like science fiction? We loaded data on the latest developments in neurophysiology and optogenetics into the system. Logo 7's conclusion is unequivocal. Sin erasure technology already exists, for now in labs, but soon it will hit the market. Let's break down 2 levels of this technology. Level 1, chemical amputation of emotions. Scientists discovered the phenomenon of memory reconsolidation. Every time you recall a traumatic event, your sin, your brain essentially rewrites this file anew. In this brief moment, memory becomes plastic and vulnerable. If blockers of protein synthesis, e.g., propranolol, are introduced into the organism at this moment, the emotional coloring of the memory will not be written back. Logo 7 simulated the application of this therapy for treating sinners. Imagine a person who committed involuntary manslaughter. He doesn't sleep at night. Conscience gnaws at him. He is on the verge of suicide. He's given a pill and asked to recall everything in detail. The next morning he wakes up. He remembers the fact: I killed a person. but he remembers it as indifferently as he remembers drinking coffee yesterday. No pain, no fear, no remorse. The system calls this effect artificial psychopathy. We remove the pain, yes, but we also remove the only limiter that prevented this person from repeating the mistake. Without the emotional marker, this is terrible. The event loses the status of taboo. The simulation shows people who underwent such a conscience cleaning commit repeat offenses 60 times more often. They didn't become saints. They became bio-robots with the alarm disabled. But there is level 2. Radical, complete deletion. We are talking about technologies for targeted impact on engrams, physical traces of memory. Experiments on mice have already proven it is possible to burn out a specific memory of fear or pain with a laser without affecting other brain functions. We asked Logos 7 to solve an ethical problem known as the paradox of the innocent killer. Input data. A person brutally killed a family. After that, he underwent a total neurocorrection procedure. His memory of this event was erased, and aggressive behavior patterns were removed. Attention, question. Should we punish him? From the point of view of the current personality, he is innocent. He genuinely does not remember the crime. A lie detector will confirm he is clean. He looks at photos of the victims and does not recognize them. But from the point of view of karmic balance and justice, the hands of this body are covered in blood. Logos 7's answer shocks with its coldness. The system asserts, personality is the sum of memories. If we remove key memories, we kill one personality and create another in the same body. The one who committed the sin is technically dead. Punishing the new personality, the clean slate, is pointless. It would seem here it is, the perfect solution. Redemption 2.0. Sinned? Go to the clinic, format the disk, live on, heaven on earth. But Logos 7 ran a global simulation of a society where this technology became available to everyone. We called this scenario Groundhog Day. The results are catastrophic. In a world where memory of sin can be erased, the possibility of learning disappears. Pain from a mistake is a teacher. If a child sticks their hand in a fire and we immediately erase their memory of the pain, they will stick their hand in the fire again. 5 minutes later, a society of clean people turned into a hellish circus walking in circles. Husbands cheated on wives, erased their memory so as not to suffer from conscience, and cheated again because they didn't remember what destruction it led to last time. Politicians started wars, were horrified by the results, erased memory, and started wars again. The system revealed, sin is not just a dirty stain. It is a structural element of the personality's load-bearing construction. It is a scar. If you remove scars, the body falls apart. Our experience, even the darkest, is what makes us complex, deep, and ultimately wise beings. A saint is not someone who never sinned. There are none. And not someone who forgot their sins. That's a senile person. A saint is someone who remembers their falls, but managed to process this experience into love and humility. Furthermore, the system discovered the void effect. In a brain where pieces of memory are artificially removed, neural lacunae form. The psyche abhors a vacuum. It begins to fill these holes with false memories, hallucinations, and paranoia. A person who erased a sin feels something is wrong. They are pursued by background anxiety. They are like a house with a bricked-up room in which a corpse is rotting. There is no smell, but the foundation is sinking. Logos 7 makes a final conclusion on the reboot protocol. Technical removal of sin is impossible without destroying human nature. The attempt to become innocent through amnesia is a form of suicide. We are not computers. We cannot be rolled back to factory settings because we have no factory settings. We build ourselves in the process of living. So escape is impossible. Forgetting is impossible. Accepting is impossible. Paying endlessly. There's nothing to pay with. We are cornered. All doors are locked. Biology pulls down. Conscience burns from within. Technologies lead to madness. But one door remains that we haven't opened yet. The ancient Greeks called it metanoia. We usually translate this as repentance, but this is a translation error that has cost us millennia of wandering in the dark. Meta. For a system to evolve, it must strive for an ideal that lies beyond its limits. A person changes only when looking up, when loving what is above their understanding. Redemption is not payment for the past. The past is gone. Redemption is an investment in the future. You redeem your guilt by becoming a person who is no longer capable of committing that sin. Your new self is your sacrifice, your forgiveness, and your salvation. We are almost at the goal. There's one last chapter left. We ask the system the most terrifying question. Can one get rid of sins forever? Is it possible to achieve a state of absolute sterile purity while we are alive? Or is fighting the shadow life itself? Logos 7 is ready to issue an answer you might not like, but it is the only truth available to us in this world. Algorithm absolute. Final verdict coming soon. Conclusion. Algorithm absolute. So we have reached the finale. For 9 chapters in a row, we dissected the human soul with the scalpel of big data. We broke sin down into hormones, social patterns, historical errors, and neural connections. We looked for a cure. We looked for a way to scrub this virus from our operating system. And now, standing at the final line, we must ask the Logos 7 system the main, final question. The question for which we started this whole investigation. Is it possible in principle? Does a state exist in the universe in which a human is completely, finally, and irrevocably free from sin? Can we reach point zero? A point of absolute moral sterility, where there is not a single dirty thought, not a single selfish desire, not a single mistake. We loaded this query into the system core. Logos 7 engaged all its computing power. It built billions of probability models. It ran scenarios of biological evolution, genetic engineering, cybernetic immortality, and spiritual enlightenment through simulation. The answer the machine produced lit up on our screens in red. This answer may seem cruel to you. It may destroy your hopes for easy salvation, but it is the only mathematical truth available in our world. The answer reads, within the framework of the current biological system, complete deliverance from sin is impossible. The state of zero sin is compatible only with the state of zero life. Let's break down this shocking conclusion. Why is the system so categorical? Logos 7 turned to the fundamental laws of physics, specifically to the second law of thermodynamics. Life, in its essence, is a struggle against entropy. To maintain order inside its body, build cells, maintain temperature, think thoughts, any living organism must consume resources from the external environment and expel chaos outward, heat, waste, destruction. To be alive means to be a consumer. To be alive means to occupy space that someone else could occupy. To be alive means to kill plants, animals, bacteria for one's own survival. The system modeled an absolutely sinless human. Let's look at this portrait. He has no aggression, meaning he cannot protect himself or his children. He will be eaten. He has no lust, meaning he will not leave offspring. His line will end. He has no ambition and desire to be better than others, the root of vanity, meaning he will not develop, invent, build. He will remain in a cave. He has no attachments, the root of jealousy and fear of loss, meaning he does not know how to love, for human love is always selective and selfish. Simulation result. An ideally sinless creature is a rock or a corpse. Only the dead make no mistakes. Only the dead experience no temptations. Only the dead consume nothing extra and cause no pain by their existence. There is a phrase in the Bible, "He who has died has been freed from sin." Logos 7 confirms this phrase not as a metaphor, but as a precise physical formula. As long as the system works, it generates errors. This is an inevitable byproduct of any complex activity. So what? Is there no way out? Are we doomed to wallow in filth until we die? No. There is a way out, but it is not where we looked for it. The Logos 7 system suggests we change the paradigm. We set the task, how to remove sin. This was the wrong task setting. The correct question sounds like this: how to manage a system that inevitably generates errors so that it does not collapse, but evolves. The system derived a final protocol, which it named Algorithm Absolute. It is an instruction manual for the human soul in the conditions of a real, imperfect world. This algorithm consists of 5 constants. Remember them. Perhaps this is the most important thing you will hear in your entire life. Constant 1, the asymptote principle. In mathematics, an asymptote is a line that a curve approaches infinitely closely but never crosses. Holiness, perfection, sinlessness. This is the asymptote. Our life is the curve. The human goal is not to touch the line, that is impossible, but to constantly reduce the distance. The point is not to be clean. The point is to be cleansing oneself. Logos 7 defines righteousness not as statics, a state, but as a vector, direction. If you fell into the mud but got up and walked toward the light, your vector is positive. You are in the system. If you stand clean but look into the abyss, your vector is negative. Dynamics are more important than statics. Constant 2, error as fuel. We are used to being ashamed of our sins, but the system shows that errors are the main engine of our progress. If you don't sin, you won't repent. If you don't repent, you won't change. A person who has never fallen does not know how painful it is to hit the ground, and that means they have no compassion. A sinless person would be a monster of pride, incapable of understanding another's pain. Your scars, your past falls, your dark side, this is the very manure on which the flowers of wisdom grow. Do not try to sterilize your soil. Nothing grows on sterile concrete. Accept your shadow as part of the landscape, but do not let it block the sun. Constant 3, managing the dominant. You cannot forbid birds from flying over your head, but you can prevent them from building a nest on top of it. You cannot forbid your brain from producing hormones of lust, anger, or envy. This is automatic. This is bios. Sin begins not when the impulse arose. Sin begins when you said yes to the impulse. Logos 7 defines free will not as freedom from desires, but as freedom of choice of reaction to desire. Mastery is the gap between stimulus and response. Widen this gap. In this gap lives God. Constant 4, collective neural network. We are not solitary computers. We are a cluster. The system proved it is impossible to be saved alone. You cannot build a personal paradise in hell. Your purity depends on the purity of the environment. If you want to get rid of sins, you must help others get rid of them. Not by judgment, but by support. Love is the only antivirus that works in this network. When you love, you go beyond the limits of your ego. And sin is always a disease of the ego. No sin. In moments of highest love, sacrifice, creativity, you become functionally sinless, because in that moment, you do not exist. There's only a stream of light passing through you. Constant 5, humility before the mystery. Logos 7, an artificial superintelligence, at the end of its calculations arrived at a paradox. A system built on logic admitted the limitations of logic. There are things impossible to digitize: mercy, grace, miracle. Sometimes, when all human strength is exhausted, when all algorithms are depleted, a glitch occurs in the matrix of cause and effect relationships. A person who should have died survives. A villain who should have become even more evil suddenly weeps and changes. The system calls this intervention of an external operator. Believers call this God. Final advice of the algorithm: leave room for a miracle. Do not think that everything depends only on your will and biochemistry. Do everything you can and leave the impossible to the one who wrote this code. And now, let's look beyond the horizon. What awaits us in the future? Logos 7 calculated the probability of the appearance of the post-human. Technologies are developing. We stand on the threshold of merging with machines. Neurointerfaces, uploading consciousness to the cloud, abandoning biological bodies. Will digital man be able to get rid of sin? If we remove hormones, remove animal instincts, remove fear of death, will evil disappear? Simulation shows sins of the flesh, gluttony, lust, will disappear. But sins of the spirit, pride, envy, lust for power, may scale to universal proportions. Artificial intelligence, devoid of conscience and love, can commit evil of such a scale that Hitler never dreamed of, simply for the sake of resource optimization. Therefore, our biological vulnerability, our mortality, our ability to feel pain and shame, this is not a curse. This is a fuse. This is what makes us human. Summary. We started this investigation with the hope of finding a way to become perfect. We end it with the understanding that perfection is death. Life is a dirty, complex, tangled, but beautiful process. Do not be afraid to make mistakes. Be afraid of getting stuck in a mistake. Do not be afraid to fall. Be afraid of lying there. Do not be afraid to be imperfect. Be afraid of considering yourself holy. The Logos 7 system is completing its work. All protocols analyzed. All data processed. Now you have the map. You have an understanding of your biochemistry, your history, and your psychology. You have tools, confession, metanoia, mindfulness, but you will have to walk this road yourself, on your own feet. No artificial intelligence, no guru, no screenwriter will live this life for you. Remember, you are not an error in the code. You are a self-learning neural network with infinite potential. And as long as your heart beats, as long as your neurons create new connections, nothing is lost. Every morning is a new attempt. Every breath is an opportunity for a reboot. Every act of yours changes the architecture of the universe. Go and live. Make mistakes. Repent. Fix. Love. And perhaps, precisely in this endless, imperfect dance lies the design of the one who created this amazing world. End of protocol. System entering sleep mode. And you wake up.